Skarloey and Rheneas were under hard times. Bad weather had been striking the island of Sodor for the last few weeks. Wind, rain and fog had become common occurrences, making life all the more difficult. Still, they persisted with their trains. They had to, if they didn't want to face an abrupt end. Recently, another little railway connected to them had closed, after all its mines had dried up. While tragic, the two engines hoped this could mean more members for their own railway. However, it was short on money, and it was already a struggle to maintain what they already had. So, the other engines were sold elsewhere, and they carried on alone. Despite its closure, some of the old tracks stayed in place. Often, Skarloey and Rheneas ventured down these routes, mainly as shortcuts, as well as alternatives if other lines weren't available. One of these lines passed the old engine sheds, with a small station halt nearby. Now completely abandoned, it sat in eerie silence, deteriorating more and more under the elements. Needless to say, for the old engines, it was a haunting sight, and was a fine reminder of what could easily be the fate of their own line. One misty day, Rheneas brought some empty rusty trucks to the old sheds. As the sidings in the main yards were filled to the brim, the foreman tasked him with leaving them somewhere else for the time being. As the old sheds were nearby, Rheneas thought it best to just leave them there. He surveyed the grim sight, and noticed a long line of track that went directly past the side of the shed. "That will do, I suppose," he muttered to himself. He slowly puffed towards the line, approaching the shed wall, now almost green from all the weeds and vines that had grown on it. The trucks themselves were in an almost equal state, their wheels squeaking and their bodies shaking from side to side. They caused quite an unbearable racket. "Could you not be any louder?" a voice bellowed. Rheneas stopped dead in his tracks. Who said that?" he called. In response, he heard an agitated sigh. Then, "Back here!" Looking ahead, Rheneas saw that behind the wall was what looked like a smaller open shed with a sloped roof. He edged a little closer until he was alongside it. He was in shock at what sat inside. It was difficult to describe at first. At a simple glance, it looked like a steam engine, based on the boiler and smoke box. Yet, it had no wheels, no cab, and its funnel stretched far above, right through the roof. On the smoke box itself was a rather irritated expression, yet Rheneas could sense a hint of sorrow hidden beneath. "What are you?" he gasped. "You typically ask who you are first," came the grumpy reply. "But if you must know, I'm a generator." "A generator?" "Well, technically I was an engine at one point, but let's just say the manager here had creative ways of dealing with troublemakers." It then looked closely at Rheneas and smiled. "In fact, I used to look exactly like you." Rheneas didn't respond immediately. He began to recall stories he heard about the other railway, about the many engines who came and went. One such story was about a reckless engine who was so bad the manager found another way to make him useful. He also remembered the name of that engine. "Are you Smudger?" he asked slowly. The generator suddenly laughed. "Oh, so you've heard of me, eh? Didn't think I'd become a local legend. I thought you were sold off like the others." "I think some of them considered it," Smudger said, But who would want an old steam generator? But surely someone might have thought to restore you to your former self. Smudger laughed again. Imagine yourself as a person for a moment. Would you buy a pricey generator, only to spend more cash to make it a working engine? Rheneas stayed silent. He couldn't think of a counterpoint. Besides, Smudger continued, your own railway doesn't seem to be in the best shape. Rheneas stared at him. How do you know? Well, the state of loads for a start, Smudger replied, glancing at the trucks. And you yourself look as if you're about to fall apart. The old engine released steam in anger. I may not look the part, but I'm still in good condition. Take it easy. Smudger's voice became more calm. I didn't mean that as an insult. I'm only stating the obvious. Having heard that, Rheneas sighed. Well, I suppose I could be better. I can tell that. A lengthy and awkward silence followed this. Rheneas looked over Smudger, noting the almost faded green paint and the rust that was building around the smoke box. Indeed, he did strongly resemble himself. Never thought I had a brother around here. Smudger sniffed. Maybe you would have found out sooner if they didn't stuff me in here. Could have gotten along too. I'm not sure. Based on what I've heard, you sounded like quite a handful. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Smudger retorted. Based on what you heard, not what actually happened. I wasn't trying to be a problem. I just wanted to be an ordinary engine, like any other. But I just couldn't. I just wasn't built right. I find that hard to believe. We're the same kind of engine, and I never came off the line without reason. Well, you were just lucky. Besides, even if it was on purpose, why did it matter? It was only a few spills, nothing more. A few spills can still damage a railway's reputation, Rheneas replied, before scoffing. I wouldn't be surprised if those spills led to your line closing. The little generator snarled like a wild animal. I'll have you know I ended up like this long before this place became a dump. Don't you dare pin the blame on me for that. And anyway, if that's how you think, who takes the blame for your line closing when you and your little pal can't turn a wheel? Rheneas gritted his teeth. He held no more patience for this thing. I'm out of here. I've got better things to do than argue with a mere boiler. With that, he stormed off in a cloud of thick steam. Not once did he glance back at Smudger. Weeks dragged by. The weather didn't exactly improve. In fact, it seemed to only worsen. All colour in the mountains was almost non-existent, and hidden away by thick swirling mist. Rheneas wasn't any better. He was short of breath and felt several aches across his boiler. He didn't think once about giving up though. He had to carry on. He had to pull his trains, not just for his sake, but for the sake of Skarloey and the railway. The more Rheneas carried on though, the more he struggled. And the more he struggled, the more that generator's words echoed in his mind. Then, one day, Rheneas returned to the old shed to pick up the trucks he left there before. He couldn't say he was happy to travel here again. The air always chilled him, more so than anywhere else. Furthermore, he knew he was going to encounter Smudger again. He did consider ignoring him, but had a feeling he wouldn't take the hint. Rheneas stopped alongside the small open shed. A pale face gazed up at him from within. Well, well, look who came to visit, Smudger remarked. The old engine looked away, not replying. Lost your voice, or just not in the mood to chat? Hard to tell. Still looking away and coupled up to the trucks, Rheneas was about to reverse when Smudger spoke again. This time, it was something he just couldn't ignore. "You're not well at all, are you?" Sighing, he finally turned his eyes. "Isn't it obvious?" he asked rhetorically. "Me and Scarlery have got the whole railway on our buffers, and we're on the verge of falling apart. Of course I'm not well." Smudger didn't respond immediately. It appeared he was more thoughtful, taking in the other engine's words. Rheneas was relieved he wasn't as snappy as before, and in a way, he felt that some weight had been lifted. "I take it then you can't get repaired?" Smudger said. "Some small fixes here and there, but we need a full overhaul at this point, and, well, that's not possible at the moment." Again, no response just yet. Within that silence, though, Rheneas saw something that surprised him. Smudger's expression shifted. His eyes pointed downwards, and he looked to be contemplating something. Something important, perhaps daunting. Finally, he looked up at his brother. "Can I ask, where were you hurting exactly?" Rheneas was taken aback. "Mainly around my boiler. Might be something with my tubes, but I don't know." "Why do you ask?" Smudger spoke more slowly and carefully. "You're probably not going to like it, but I do know one source for parts you could use. It shouldn't take much time, and it won't cost anything, I think." Rheneas perked up. "A source? Where?" he asked desperately. Then, a smile emerged on the generator's face. Except, it was a very sad smile, almost like it was trying to present bravery, to cover up a grim realization. "Well, you're basically looking at it." Now, the old engine was confused. When it eventually hit him, his mouth dropped. "What? You're not serious?" "Well, I can't promise everything is in the best shape, but I'm sure there's something worth salvaging." Rheneas was left in shock. "But I can't. Do you understand what that means for you? You'll be nothing. You'll cease to exist. Is that what you want?" Smudger expected his idea to be met with disdain, and yet Rheneas' outburst caught him off guard. "Rheneas," he said quietly, "what I said before, about you getting the blame for the line closing, I shouldn't have said that, and I'm sorry. I didn't get along with everyone here, but I didn't want this place to shut down. I never wanted the engines and people here to be out of a job. I don't like the idea of that happening to you either. If there's something I can do to stop that, if I can help to keep you going for at least a while, please, let me do this." Rheneas felt like he was going to cry. How could he accept this? Would he really allow for his brother to be taken apart for his sake? How selfish would that be? Then again, the railway crossed his mind. So too did Scarlery. If he failed, he would run the line alone, and no doubt follow suit. He couldn't allow that either. He soon realized that it all came down to what Smudger wanted. "Are you sure? Are you really sure you want this?" Smudger thought about it. Then that brave smile returned. "I am. Now, trying to hold back the tears, Rheneas took a deep breath. "I'll inform my manager," he said. With a mournful toot of his whistle, he slowly backed away from the shed. Smudger watched on, in respectful silence. It was only when he was far away, out of sight, that Rheneas allowed the tears to flow freely. Hours went by. The day transitioned into early evening. The mist had slightly faded, revealing a hazy orange sunset. Rheneas made his way back to the old shed, now hauling a singular van, crammed with workmen and tools. Upon hearing of Smudger and his solution, the manager was quick to act, ordering the workmen to examine the generator and salvage anything worthwhile. They stopped alongside Smudger, who looked up with interest. "Huh," he muttered, watching the workmen step out of the van. "So your manager agreed to it?" "He was quite enthusiastic about it," Rheneas said, shakily. "He wanted you to know that he greatly appreciates your sacrifice." Smudger grinned. "Oh, it's good to know I'll be doing something useful." As the workman walked around him, he noticed Rheneas glancing away, and looked like he was about to leave. "Rheneas," he whispered, "you're staying, right?" Looking back, the little engine's heart sank at the sorry expression his brother held. His eyes were somewhat glassy, and yet no tears. Still, nothing had to be said to know that deep down he was scared. "What am I thinking?" Rheneas thought. Was he really going to leave him alone? "Just for a while," Smudger continued, "until it's over." "Of course," Rheneas said quickly. "Of course I'll stay. I'm not going anywhere." Having heard that, Smudger's face softened. "By the way," Rheneas added, "I'm sorry for what I said before, about you being responsible for the line's closure." The generator rolled his eyes dismissively. "Oh, don't go on about it. Maybe you're right, maybe not. Doesn't really matter in the end." After an assessment, one workman brought out a box of various tools, ready to perform the operation. "I wish I'd gotten to know you more," Rheneas said. As the workmen were about to begin, Smudger gave a final dry laugh. "Nah, you'd probably hate me." While Rheneas by no means felt perfect, he was certainly much better than he was before. Running the railway was still a great struggle, but things seemed to run a little more smoothly. In the grim weather, soils on the hills above the old shed became weak and slowly washed down to the tracks. It went without saying that the area was no longer safe, so the lines were closed off permanently, and neither Skarloey nor Rheneas saw the old sheds again. Over time, the area became more green as nature took over. Trees and thick bushes grew all around, consuming the tracks and buildings. Despite history being left to decay, the air became more clear and peaceful, the area forever remaining in a calm atmosphere. All that said, ever since receiving the new paths, if you could call them that, Rheneas felt different. He couldn't really describe it, but it seemed that no matter where he was never alone. It was as if there was an invisible presence lurking around him at all hours of the day. A watchful spirit, perhaps. It was honestly a frightening thought for him. It was only when Rheneas got a proper overhaul years later, when all his parts were replaced, that he stopped sensing that presence altogether. It was only then that he finally had an idea of who it could have been. And when that happened, it was no longer an unsettling thought, but a comforting one.